Hey guys, welcome back. We're doing a reading of Chapter 2 of Holy Ground, an Odyssey 1 story, to use the Rogue Squadron kind of introduction here. I did Chapter 1 previously. I'll include a link here, obviously, to get you back in case you missed that. The book should drop today. It should either be available while you're reading this or immediately, pretty soon after. If it's available when I upload it, I will include. Well, I'm going to include a link anyway. You can go check and see if it's still pre-order or if it's been fully dropped. All right. No jumping around. Let's just get straight to it. We're going to do Chapter 2 of Holy Ground. Kitakyushu. Hadrian hung on as the bus swerved. Lanes split in a couple of slow-moving cars that didn't seem to know exactly what the hell they were doing. They swerved away from the bus, laying angrily on the horns, but he just patted the corporal's shoulder and nodded in approval. "Just don't kill anyone if you can help it," he said. "You got it, Gunny." Jack Hadrian still didn't know what the hell was going on, but with the near constant sound of sonic booms rattling the bus, he didn't see how it could in any way be a good thing. Unfortunately, for the moment, the only thing he could do was focus on getting his Marines back to base so they could find out exactly what they needed to be doing. Even if he had any idea of what else to do, they were all running around naked as the day they were born as far as he was concerned. Civvies were no value in anything more than a bar fight. He stepped down toward the door, reaching over to open the folding mechanism and leaned out so he could look up into the sky. Overhead, he could see the enemy fighter craft wheeling in the distance, clearly maintaining a cap over the coast. He assumed they were covering the other craft he'd seen coming in from the Sea of Japan. The hell are those things, and why weren't we briefed that the bloc was ready to field them? Ever since the Eastern Bloc had been formed, at first through an unlikely alliance of China and India, intel on the ground had been getting spottier out of the region. However, he believed that they still had pretty solid intercepts and a good overview of what the bloc's military was capable of. Someone had apparently dropped the ball on this one. However, because what he was seeing was like nothing in any of the intel packets he'd seen, and he paid attention to what the bloc's Air Force was pending. It was part of his damn job. Something else flitted by over his head, making him duck a bit before he recognized the distinctive roar and the following boom. F-35s, Jack thought, eyes tracking the squadron. Looks like the Air Force, and the ready response out of Iwakuni, too. Godspeed, you crazy bastards. Give 'em hell. The Green Knights. Wolf led the Knights in, staying above the Air Force squadron as the Panthers headed for the coast. They had hot radar tracking up ahead and lots of contacts on their screens as they approached the coast. As he watched, a set of signals peeled off from the main group, heading their way. "Heads up, Panthers," he called. "Enemy contacts inbound." "We see them, Lycan. Keep them off us. We'll see about those surface contacts," high-rise support responded. "You've got it," Wolf said, arming his weapons. "Knights, we have what looks to be a target-rich environment. Let's thin that herd." "Hoorah, sir!" Wolf grinned to himself as he picked one of the targets, lighting it up in his HUD and waited for the tone to settle. "Night actual? Fox 3. He pressed the button and felt the fighter jump slightly as he put the AIM-120G AMRAAM into the air. The missile's rocket motor screamed into action, lancing the weapon away from its fighter, spewing white smoke in its wake. He heard the squadron call out similar reports. AMRAAMs filled the sky. The AIM-120G was a radar-guided intercept air-to-air missile, capable of breaking hypersonic with a top speed of Mach 6.5 at FL-35. At that speed, the birds made 5,000 miles an hour when they topped out, fast enough to track any aircraft on the planet, run it down, and destroy it before the average person could do more than blink. 6 AMRAAMs led the way as the Green Knights fired into the block's advance line, hitting their top end in seconds and crossing the dozens of kilometers in just seconds more as they twisted in on their targets. The unknown profile of the fighters they were targeting were closing with the incoming missiles, shortening the intercept time even more. In the few seconds between launch and contact, however, the block fighters suddenly accelerated. Closing on the approaching missiles, the fighters suddenly went hypersonic themselves, climbing at blinding rates, evading the AMRAAMs in the blink of an eye, before arcing back over and lancing back in towards the F-35s from the rear. "Fuck me sideways!" Wolf wasn't sure who said it. Might even have been him. He was too busy working stick and throttle while his brain was playing catch-up to the goddamn impossible maneuvering the enemy fighters had just pulled out of their asses. "Split S," he ordered. "Evade! Evade! Evade!" "High-rise, we're in trouble here. Get your ass out of the hot zone." The block fighters were in the midst of their formation before he finished speaking, and Night 2 vanished in a blaze of fire and smoke as Wolf threw his fighter over hard, while abruptly pulling the thrust vector and controls hard back in ways they were never intended to be used. His fighter screamed in protest, turbines threatening to tear the whole airframe apart around him as the thrust was put out perpendicular to the intended stress forces, throwing the F-35 clear of an enemy fighter as his missiles chewed up the air he just inhabited. "All points, Lycan! Enemy fighters, unknown configuration," he called out as he maneuvered, hoping someone was recording what he was saying, just in case the telemetry wasn't getting out. "Unprecedented acceleration. They must be drones. No pilot could have survived that. Speed is hypersonic easily. They outran our missiles and outmaneuvered our fighters." "Roger, Lycan," the calm voice of an air combat controller broke in. "Pull back from the fighting if you can. Continue to transmit any and all observation." "No way we can withdraw. Fuck! They got another one of my squadron," he swore, bringing his fighter around so he could get the GAU 22/C gun pod into play, but the enemy fighters were moving so fast he couldn't quite manage it. "Jesus, they maneuver like they're on rails. G-forces have got to be off the charts." He flinched as Night 6 vanished from the screens. He lost half his ready response team in just a handful of seconds, and they not even been able to extract any from the enemy in turn. "We got trouble down here," High-Rise was calling out urgently. "Need support, right now." "Get on the deck and into the mountain valleys," Wolf ordered. "Lose them in the damn trees if you have to. We'll give you what cover we can. Move, move, move!" The Panthers broke from their course, dropping fast. Wolf followed them, hoping the enemy would have to slow down that close to the ground. "Panthers," the combat controller calmly slipped in, "get low, stay fast. Green Knights, provide cover as you follow. I'm directing anti-air forces to intercept, but you'll need to lead them into the kill zone." "Fine by me," Wolf growled. "You should see the valley coming up on your right, tracing the highway. Follow the road." "Roger that, Control," High-Rise acknowledged. "Panthers complying." "Green Knights are all in, Controller," Wolf said. "Show us the way to payback." "Just stay with me, Lycan. High-Rise, I've got you on my control path, and all hell is waiting at the end of the road." Route 33 North, Kitakyushu. The traffic thinned out drastically as they got out of the city, but Hadrian wasn't paying much attention to that as they sped along the highway, heading north to Route 33 on-ramp just a couple kilometers ahead. He'd seen the missiles fly on past overhead, but a depressing lack of explosions in the sky behind them, and a much more depressing number in the sky up ahead. If he was reading it right, the good guys had just gotten a new hole ripped right up between their cheeks. He hoped he was wrong, but he was scanning the skies for shoots because he was pretty damn sure he wasn't. "Hey, Gunny, you know what's going on?" Hadrian glanced back, about to retort with a caustic remark until he saw the expression of the men looking his way. His guys were good, but they were all new, and honestly, he didn't think any Marine had seen this for longer than he'd been in. "Had a guess," he said calmly as he could. "I'd say the bloc finally decided they could take us and made their move. I'm only surprised it's here and not in Taiwan." Assuming they're not hitting Taiwan even as we speak, he thought without speaking it aloud. Hadrian expected they were. In fact, now that he was thinking about it, he doubted that had been lightning he'd seen over the horizon earlier. North Korea probably coordinated with the bloc, assuming they hadn't been fully subsumed already. He doubted Seoul was still there, not if those flashes were what he thought anyway. It's a bad day for a lot of good people. "They're wrong, though, right, Gunny?" Hadrian blinked, looking back, fighting to keep a confused expression on his face. "What's that, Private?" he asked. "They're wrong. You said they think they can take us, but they're wrong, right?" "Yeah, sure," he said, though he wasn't so sure of it. The bloc, hell, the Chinese really, had been looking for this moment for a long damn time. The only thing that kept them out of Taiwan through the latter half of the 20th and 21st century so far was the fact that they knew they couldn't take the U.S. Navy. Invading China would be suicide for the West, everyone knew that, but no matter how many people the bloc had, it wasn't possible to move around fast enough to counter the force projection of the U.S. Navy if they moved beyond their borders, saying nothing about American allies. That had been changing over the last few decades, however. The old force projection capacity of the U.S. forces was such that in their prime, Hadrian knew that American forces could fight off 2 full wars and still put down a major brush fire somewhere. That wasn't in the cards any longer. They only had 1 carrier task group in the Pacific at the moment, and he wasn't even really sure where it was. But he bet good money that the bloc wasn't as in the dark on that as he was. If they were willing to move, they really thought they could do the job. And he, for one, couldn't quite swear they were wrong, no matter what he told his men. Green Knights. With the Panthers on the deck screaming up the valley along the highway at better than Mach 2, Wolfe kept the rest of his squad above them in an attempt to keep the defenseless fighters with the air-to-ground ordnance a chance. The enemy were coming around, though, and he could feel them light his fighter up a moment before the computer started screaming at him that someone had a lock on his ass. Missiles were in the air a moment later, causing him to twist in his ace's ejection seat to get an eye on. Those are standard missiles. No earth-shattering changes there, thank God. The Chi-Com missile was reading as a Thunderbolt 33 to his computer, something he knew how to deal with. He waited a moment after arming the jammers and flares, then launched a full set of Angel's wings into the air behind them, throwing the enemy missiles off as they broke the lock. He kept an eye on them just the same, though, until the confused birds slammed into the mountains they were flying through. Enemy missiles are standard, expected ordnance, he radioed. Nice to know they didn't hide something from us like that, too. That's great news, High Rise growled. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to strangle some intel weenie when I get out of this. You and me both, pal. The enemy fighters were flitting about, too fast for him to track, and while he was confident in being able to spoof the missiles, it was goddamn hard to fool a bullet, and he figured they had to have guns on those sleds. Keep moving, Panthers. We can only hold them off for so long, he called, as he looked over his shoulder, rocking the fighter back and forth to confuse the enemy. Roger that, Lycan. Thanks for the cover. We said we'd give you a cap, High Rise. We keep our word. Wolfe just wasn't sure how long they'd be able to keep that up. The battle had turned into rout so quickly he was still in shock. He wasn't supposed to be running from the enemy. He was a goddamn U.S. Marine. The initial engagement had been so one-sided, he didn't even really know what happened, aside from the fact that his squadron had got new assholes ripped, hey diddle right up the middle. The order to disengage had come so quickly, Wolfe wasn't even sure where it had come from. A glance at his board showed that the JSDF boys had gotten the shit kicked out of them as bad or worse than his own. There were maybe half the lights showing than when they'd started, and only if he was being really generous about it. At that rate, if we pressed, we'd have been wiped out in seconds, long before any of the bases could have even wound up. That explained the disengage orders at least. If they'd been able to put up a fight, even a losing one, he'd have been willing to press the engagement as long as he knew help was coming. If they were all going to go down in flames before the cavalry could even mount up, fuck that. He was just surprised that someone had put it together that fast and realized what a fucking disaster they were dealing with. Okumakura. Master Sergeant Kiran Jiang knelt at the edge of a small copse of trees that was growing along the ridgeline he'd been dropped off on with his gear, just barely ahead of the ready response. Air Force had barely gotten any warning of the block movement. They'd suddenly appeared on radar and satellite like they'd appeared from literal thin air. That alone would have been workable, except that the heavy lift units the enemy had fielded were a lot faster than anyone figured when they were first spotted. They crossed the Sea of Japan in minutes instead of hours, landing in Taiwan barely 15 minutes after they'd first been spotted. Someone's been planning this for a long time, Kieran thought grimly as he checked his gear. Panthers, Knights, the Air Force combat controller said calmly. I've got you on my screens, bringing you right to me. How are you holding up? These guys are fast, friend. Hope you've got a nice welcome ready. That was Major Wolfe, Kieran noted, leader of the Green Knights, call sign Lycan. The JSDF anti-air is all wound up and ready to roll out a good old-fashioned Japanese welcome, Lycan. You stay focused and get on getting here ahead of them and in one piece. You hear me? Roger that. Kieran left the fighters on an open receiver channel but killed transmission as he swapped over to the JSDF frequencies and began speaking in Japanese. We have inbound hostile contacts, chasing friendly squadrons, he said. Confirm readiness to intercept. We are ready, the JSDF major replied. All units ready to launch. Thank you. Stand by, Kieran said, again flipping back to the fighters' channel as he kept an eye on the skies. The enemy fighters were visible in the distance now, and he quickly brought up an imager with good optics to get some photos. He uploaded those to the overhead satellite while he spoke. When you fly over, keep on the hammer. The sky is going to be thick with seekers, and in that mess, mistakes can happen, boys. He listened to the chatter between the Knights and Panthers in response to that, while he filled out the identification chart from the unknown fighter profile. His photos weren't great, but they were better than anyone else seemed to have, so he tagged them in it, added the speculated capabilities he'd gotten from Lycan's reports, credited the Marine for it before he updated the file and sent it along to PAC-AFCOM. That done, Kieran glanced back just as the Panthers screamed by overhead. In Japanese, he spoke to the JSDF forces that were parked along the local highway wherever they'd been able to set up in a hurry. They are coming, he told the Major. Friendly IFFs are in your system. We have them, the Major responded. Friendly avoidance is entered. All batteries are preparing to fire. Kieran nodded, speaking in English. Light those bastards up. With pleasure, the Major told him, also switching to English as flashes of light erupted from the shadows of the valleys around him, missiles reaching up into the skies. Watch your asses, boys, Kieran said over the fighters' channel. The sky just got a lot less friendly. Holy shit. Wolf didn't reprimand Night 3 for swearing on an open channel, but only because he was too busy thinking of pretty much the same thing to notice. The hills of the prefecture below were sprouting more missiles and trees, or so it seemed, as the JSDF let loose with everything they had. He didn't know how they'd gotten it all there so fast, but then again, the Japanese had always taken the threat of the Chinese forces more seriously than the U.S. had in his experience. He just slammed the throttle forward, lighting the afterburner, and prayed the IFF didn't fail. Forward on, Knights, don't look back. With the enemy hot on their turbines, the Green Knights followed the Panthers through a killing field. That's the end of Chapter 2 of Holy Ground. The novel should now be available. I am going to continue reading, I think, for at least another 2, maybe 3 chapters. I think Chapter 5 will wrap it up for a good spot to stop the reading, unless you guys really like this. All I can say is if you want me to keep going, put it in the comments, hit like, whatever. Just something to let me know. Share the first one. If you know anybody who might want to might like this type of story. And in general, just enjoy it. Alright, I'm going to cut this out. It's been 18 minutes. That's long enough, I think. We'll do Chapter 3 next week. Alright, guys. Have a good one. Stay safe and enjoy the book. Cheers.